My husband told the doctors to pull the plug on me, but I woke up and heard everything. So I decided to end his scheme first. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the first thing that penetrated my consciousness. Rhythmic, clinical, relentless. Each electronic pulse sent a chill down my spine as I struggled to open my eyes against the harsh fluorescent lighting that seemed determined to blind me. October in Chicago. The city was already surrendering to fall's early grip. Gray skies, chilly winds, and that peculiar melancholy that always accompanied the dying year. Not that I could see any of it from where I lay. All I knew was the sterile whiteness of what I gradually recognized as St. Clair Hospital's intensive care unit. My head throbbed with a pain so intense it felt like shattered glass beneath my skull. Every muscle in my body felt leaden, unresponsive, as though I'd been crushed under some immense weight. 3 days, I would later learn. 3 days I'd been unconscious after my car mysteriously spun out of control on the expressway outside the city. No witnesses. Just another accident blamed on adverse weather conditions, according to the preliminary police report. I tried to move my fingers but could barely manage a twitch. My throat felt like sandpaper, parched and raw. That's when I heard his voice. Victor, my husband of 42 years. After 4 decades of marriage, you'd think you know someone's voice in every possible emotional register. But what I heard chilled me more than the antiseptic air of the ICU. Yes, I understand the timeline, Victor was saying, his tone businesslike, cold. But we need to expedite the will processing. Once the doctors declare her condition irreversible, how quickly can we secure the transfer of assets? I froze, not from my injuries but from shock. Victor wasn't speaking to a doctor or family member. This wasn't concern. This was calculation. Excellent, he continued, lower now but still audible in the quiet room. Once the medical team confirms her permanently incapacitated state, everything transfers to me within 72 hours. The board won't have time to react. I wanted to scream, to sit up and confront him, but my body betrayed me. Only a weak moan escaped my lips. Victor didn't even turn around. I need the transfer papers ready for the private facility, he instructed someone. A nurse I didn't recognize standing near the doorway. St. Clair is too public. We need somewhere more secure, more discreet. My mind raced despite the fog of medication. Victor, planning to move me to a private facility? The same Victor who had insisted on checking my car just days before the accident? My years as CEO of Peer Smart hadn't made me paranoid. They'd made me perceptive. This wasn't coincidence. This was conspiracy. As Victor prepared to leave, he placed a thick envelope on the chair beside my bed. Even from my limited vantage point, I could glimpse the embossed logo, Steele and Partners, a law firm I'd never heard of, certainly not one our family had ever retained. When the door closed behind him, I forced myself to remain still, to keep my breathing even despite the panic rising in my chest. 40 years of corporate leadership had taught me one invaluable lesson: never let your adversary know you've identified them. The heart rate monitor betrayed nothing of the storm within me. Shock, betrayal, pain, all tempered by a cold, calculating clarity that had served me well throughout my career. My husband wanted me dead, or worse, permanently incapacitated, unable to challenge him as he seized control of everything I'd built. I decided then that I would not give him the satisfaction. I would play unconscious, play weak, gather information, and find allies, all from this hospital bed that Victor had intended to be my prison, perhaps even my deathbed. As my eyes drifted toward the envelope with the unfamiliar law firm's logo, a shadow moved across the doorway, a figure I didn't recognize, neither Victor nor the nurse from earlier. The silhouette paused, observing me for a moment before slipping away. In that moment, I realized the game was far more complex than I'd imagined. Someone else was watching. But were they Victor's accomplice or another player entirely? Day 4 after the accident, and I'd perfected my performance. Eyes half-lidded, movements sluggish, words slurred when doctors were present. But behind this facade of weakness, I was cataloging every visitor, every conversation, every shadow that crossed my doorway. That's when I first noticed him. Damien Brooks, the night shift head nurse. Unlike the other staff who doted on Victor during his visits, Damien kept his distance, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He moved with quiet efficiency, checking vitals with practiced precision, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. There was something refreshingly honest about his detachment. When we were alone during his 2 a.m. rounds, I decided to test him. "The private facility," I murmured, my voice deliberately faint. "Is it ready for my transfer?" His hands paused momentarily on the IV line. "I'm not aware of any transfer orders, Mrs. Pierce." I watched his micro-expressions carefully, a skill honed through decades of boardroom negotiations. My husband's lawyers must have submitted the paperwork already. A flicker of something, concern, suspicion, crossed his face. Which lawyers would those be? I noted how he tensed at the mention of Victor. This wasn't the reaction of someone in my husband's pocket. During his next check, I took a calculated risk. As he leaned over to adjust my monitors, I whispered, "I know I'm not safe here. Can you help me?" His eyes widened slightly, darting to the corners of the room as if checking for surveillance devices. Without responding, he continued his work professionally, made notes on his tablet, and left. But 3 hours later, he returned, clipboard in hand. "Need to verify some equipment readings," he announced loudly enough for anyone in the hallway to hear. Once certain we were alone, he leaned close. "Mrs. Pierce, I need you to be straight with me. What's happening here?" In hushed tones, I shared everything. Victor's phone call about expediting my will, the transfer plans, the mystery law firm, even my suspicions about my accident. Damien's jaw tightened. "Your husband comes every day at the same time. Always ends his visits with a trip to administration. He's put privacy locks on your medical records. Only certain staff can access them." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Let's just say I've seen similar situations before," he replied carefully. "But I need proof before I stick my neck out." I told him about the envelope Victor had left behind. "If you can get that, you'll have your proof." The next night, Damien returned, his face grim. He pulled the envelope from inside his scrubs and handed it to me. I checked it. "You need to see this." The documents inside confirmed my worst fears. Draft amendments to my will that would give Victor complete control of Outsmarted, the company I'd built from a regional chain into a national retail empire, if I was declared permanently incapacitated. The legal language was coldly efficient, designed to transfer everything with minimal oversight. "This is worse than I thought," Damien said, his professional detachment finally cracking. "You built Outsmarted, didn't you? It's worth billions," I finished for him, "and Victor wants it all." Damien made his decision. "I have a friend in IT who owes me a favor. We can monitor Victor's calls within the hospital system, track what documents he brings in and out." We formulated a plan. Damien would gather intelligence while I maintained my charade. I instructed him to note any mention of anyone named Steele, particularly in connection with the law firm on the envelope. "Be careful," Damien warned before leaving. "Several senior doctors seem unusually accommodating to your husband's requests, especially the chief resident. I think he's buying influence." Something hardened inside me that night. The shock and betrayal were still there, but now channeled into the cold, calculated strategy that had served me well as CEO. Victor had forgotten who he was dealing with. I hadn't built an empire by being easily outmaneuvered. Close to midnight, Damien slipped back into my room, his face tense as he handed me a printout. "First batch of phone logs, look at who he's been calling." My blood ran cold as I scanned the list. In the past 48 hours, Victor had called one number 6 times, Veronica Steele. But what made my skin crawl wasn't just the frequency of the calls. It was the timestamp of the most recent one. 5 minutes ago. I looked up at Damien, my voice barely a whisper. She's here, isn't she? Somewhere in the hospital. Right now. While I was fighting my private war from a hospital bed, my life's work, Pure Smart, was under siege. Later, Damien would bring me reports of what happened during that first week after my accident. The atmosphere at Pure Smart headquarters in downtown Chicago had changed overnight. The bustling, collaborative environment I'd cultivated for decades had transformed into something tense and oppressive once the announcement went out about my incapacitation due to health concerns. Spencer Reed, our 48-year-old CFO and Victor's right-hand man, wasted no time. Armed with an emergency authorization document that Victor had drafted himself, completely illegal, but executed before anyone could object, Spencer called an emergency meeting of all department heads. As you all know, he began, with that smug, practiced corporate sympathy I'd always despised. Mrs. Pierce's condition has necessitated immediate leadership changes. Mr. Sullivan has appointed me interim CEO to ensure the company's stability during this difficult time. The room fell silent. Many of those department heads had been with me for over a decade. They knew this wasn't right, but shock and corporate protocol kept them quiet. Spencer continued, unveiling what he called financial restructuring measures. Effective immediately, we'll reduce workforce by 20% across all smaller branches. All overtime is canceled, and we're implementing stricter KPI requirements. We're discontinuing over 200 underperforming product lines to streamline inventory. These weren't just business decisions, they were direct attacks on everything I'd built. Those underperforming products included specialty items that had defined Pure Smart for years, unique offerings that our loyal customers counted on, even if their profit margins weren't astronomical. Lena Morris, our 30-year-old produce department head, was the only one with the courage to speak up. I'd always admired her directness, her unwavering commitment to our employees. These cuts directly contradict our core values, she challenged. Our loyal customers shop with us precisely because of our quality service and diverse product range. This isn't just bad for morale, it's bad business. Spencer's response was immediate and cutting. Perhaps your management position needs reevaluation, Ms. Morris. This isn't a debate club. The stunned silence that followed told its own story. My company, the one I'd built from a single store to a national chain, was being dismantled from within. Word spread quickly throughout the organization. Tyler Grant, a 32-year-old assistant manager and Lena's close colleague, saw his hours slashed. I don't know how I'll make rent next month, he confided to Lena after the meeting. The panic was palpable. Employees who had never worried about job security suddenly found themselves updating resumes. Team members who had once collaborated now competed, afraid they might be next on the chopping block. Lena, sharp as always, recognized what was happening. This isn't normal cost cutting, she told Tyler. They're systematically destroying Charlotte's vision for Pure Smart. It's like they're trying to erase her legacy before she's even gone. Within days, rumors of internal crisis at Pure Smart leaked to the financial press. Our stock took an immediate hit, along with our hard-earned reputation for stability and employee satisfaction. After another contentious meeting where Spencer announced more cuts, Lena drove home, her mind racing. She shared everything with her mother, Maggie Ellis, a woman known for her unsettlingly accurate intuitions. Something's very wrong, Mom, Lena said, collapsing onto the couch. It's like they can't wait to tear apart everything Charlotte built. Maggie set down her tea, her expression grave. I had a dream about Charlotte last night. Lena looked up. Her mother's dreams were family legend. She was surrounded by dark hands reaching for her, Maggie continued. Victor stood behind them all, smiling that cold smile of his. And that man you mentioned, Spencer, he was holding papers, red as blood. Mom, you're scaring me. You should be scared, Maggie said flatly. Charlotte is in danger. Real danger. The next morning, Lena called St. Clair Hospital. I'd like an update on Charlotte Pierce's condition. I'm sorry, the receptionist replied with practiced politeness. But Mrs. Pierce's information is under privacy restriction. We can't provide any details. Minutes after hanging up, Lena's phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. If you want to know the truth about Charlotte Pierce, be at the back entrance of St. Clair Hospital at 9 p.m. Tell no one. When Lena tried calling the number back, an automated message stated the number was not in service. But what truly sent chills down her spine was the attachment. A photo showing me lying in my hospital bed, with a document clearly visible on the bedside table. A document bearing the Steele and Partners logo. Who had taken that photo? And what was on that document that was important enough to risk sending to a complete stranger? Day 7 after the accident. While I continued my charade in the hospital room, the first pieces of my counteroffensive were falling into place beyond these sterile walls. At precisely 9 p.m., Lena Morris arrived at the rear entrance of St. Clair, her heart pounding. She'd come prepared. Recorder activated on her phone, pepper spray in her pocket, and a colleague waiting for her check-in text every 15 minutes. Years of management had taught her that preparation isn't paranoia, it's protection. The service area was deserted except for a solitary figure leaning against the wall, Damian Brooks, still in his hospital scrubs. Ms. Morris? He approached cautiously. I'm Damian Brooks, head nurse on the night shift. I sent you the message. Lena maintained her distance. Prove it. Without a word, Damian pulled out his phone, showing her the same photo he'd sent, me in my hospital bed with the Steele and Partners document visible. Why should I trust you? Lena demanded. Damian handed her a folder. Because Mrs. Pierce does. Inside was a photocopy of Victor's draft will, pages of legalese with one crystal-clear purpose, transferring complete control of Pierce Mart to Victor should I be declared permanently incapacitated. Oh my God, Lena whispered. They moved to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, choosing a corner booth where they could speak privately while watching the door. Victor comes to the hospital every day at the same time, Damian explained. After visiting Mrs. Pierce, he meets with a woman named Veronica Steele in one of our administrative conference rooms. Steele? Lena's eyes widened. Like the law firm? Exactly. My friend in IT pulled the hospital call logs. Victor is arranging an off-books patient transfer, completely illegal without patient consent. He's planning to move Mrs. Pierce somewhere beyond our reach. Lena opened her laptop, showing Damian internal documents she'd smuggled out of Pierce Mart. Meanwhile, Spencer Reed is signing contracts in Mrs. Pierce's name, asset liquidations, supplier terminations. He's dismantling the company piece by piece. Damian leaned forward. Mrs. Pierce believes this goes beyond her husband's greed. We need eyes outside the hospital. Can you monitor Spencer? Find out who else might be involved? I can do better than that, Lena replied. I can give you documentation of every unauthorized action he's taken. I've already placed a recording device in the VIP conference room where Victor meets Veronica, Damian said. But we need to move quickly. We have maybe 72 hours to gather enough evidence for Mrs. Pierce's lawyers before Spencer calls an emergency shareholders meeting. Lena hesitated. How is Charlotte, really? Is she aware? Damian smiled for the first time. Mrs. Pierce is fully conscious and orchestrating this entire operation from her hospital bed. She's pretending to be weaker than she is to keep Victor unaware. That sounds like the Charlotte Pierce I know. Before they parted, Damian handed Lena a small electronic device. A recording bug. If you can place this in Spencer's office, we might get the connection we need. When Damian returned to the hospital that night, his face was grim as he checked my vitals. Someone entered your room while I was gone, he whispered. They erased the security footage for this entire wing. I know, I replied softly. A woman came in after midnight. She went through the file cabinet but didn't approach the bed. I kept my eyes closed. Damien looked concerned. Was it Veronica Steele? I couldn't see clearly, but whoever it was, they moved like someone used to not being noticed. He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. I got something from the conference room. Listen. Victor's voice came through clearly. Once the chief physician signs off on her irreversible condition, we can proceed with the final steps. A woman's voice, cool, cultivated, confident. And remember, when Pierce Mart comes under your control, 30% of the shares transfer to the parent company as agreed. I felt my blood run cold. Parent company? This is bigger than Victor, isn't it? Damien nodded grimly. Much bigger. Your husband isn't just trying to steal your company. He's planning to sell a significant portion to someone else. We need to find out who Veronica Steele really is, I said. I'm working on it. But we need to be careful. The next morning, just as Damien was preparing to send me the full audio file through our secure channel, his tablet pinged with an anonymous email. The subject line read, "Stop interfering if you don't want to become St. Clair's next patient." Attached was a high-resolution photo taken the previous night, Damien and Lena, captured in perfect detail as they conversed at the hospital's back entrance. Damien showed it to me during his rounds, his face pale. Someone is watching every move we make. But who? 2 days after the threatening email arrived, Damien and Lena met in the hospital cafeteria, pretending to be casual acquaintances. Over tasteless coffee and under the hum of fluorescent lights, they agreed to go completely offline with our operations. No emails, no texts. Only USB drives and external hard drives would carry our sensitive information from now on. Someone's monitoring our digital communications, Damien whispered, eyes scanning the room. We need to assume everything electronic is compromised. When he returned to my room later that night, I could see the strain on his face. Time was running out. With each passing hour, Victor moved closer to his endgame. It's time to force his hand, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in days. I need to get Victor to confess. Damien looked skeptical. That's incredibly risky, Mrs. Pierce. Risk is how I built my company, I reminded him. And right now, a calculated risk is our best chance. We spent the next hour preparing. Damien swept the room for bugs, then carefully concealed a miniature recording device in the padding of my hospital bed, close enough to capture every word, yet impossible to spot during a casual inspection. I'd spent my career reading people across negotiating tables. Now I'd use those skills for the most important confrontation of my life. The next morning, I instructed the day nurse to call Victor. Tell him I'm feeling stronger and want to discuss the will, just in case. The bait was set. Victor arrived within the hour, moving with the confident stride of a man who believes he's already won. I watched him through half-closed eyes, studying the husband I'd slept beside for over 4 decades who had become a stranger. "Charlotte," he said, his voice dripping with practiced concern. "The nurse said you wanted to talk about the will." I feigned weakness, my voice deliberately fragile. "I've been thinking, Victor. If things don't improve, I want to make sure everything's handled properly." His eyes lit up, though he quickly masked it with a solemn nod. He pulled a document from his briefcase, the very will I'd seen in the envelope days earlier. "I've taken the liberty of having our lawyers draft this," he said, placing it on my lap. "It's straightforward. It ensures I can maintain control of PeerSmart if you're incapacitated. Just to keep things running smoothly, of course." I let my fingers tremble as I flipped through the pages. So many changes at the company lately. Spencer seems to be making big decisions. Victor couldn't resist. He never could when it came to boasting. Spencer's following my directive perfectly. We've streamlined operations, cut the dead weight. Once the merger with Steele's parent company goes through, Pierce Mart will be transformed. Merger? I whispered, encouraging him to reveal more. Just business details you don't need to worry about, Victor said dismissively, but his pride pushed him to continue. The chief physician will sign off on your condition tomorrow. I've made it worth his while. By noon, we'll have you transferred to a private facility where you'll receive appropriate care. The cold calculation in his voice chilled me. 42 years of marriage, and I had never truly known him. If I sign this now, I asked, gesturing weakly to the will, you'll make sure everything goes smoothly? Victor's smile never reached his eyes. You don't need to worry anymore, Charlotte. Everything is practically finalized already. When he finally left, satisfied that I was both compliant and clueless, Damien slipped in. He carefully retrieved the recording device, and we listened together. Every damning word was captured perfectly: the bribery, the planned transfer, the merger negotiations with Steele's organization. It was the smoking gun we needed. This is enough, Damien said. We need to get this to your lawyer immediately. Before he could leave, his phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Emergency. Spencer just called an extraordinary shareholders meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Topic: Declaration of CP's irreversible medical condition and leadership transition. Our timeline had just collapsed. Worse still, Damien discovered while checking security protocols that someone had accessed the hospital's camera system again, specifically targeting the footage from my room during Victor's visit. They were checking to see if my weakness was genuine. Just before midnight, Dr. Harper, the only senior physician who hadn't been corrupted by Victor's influence, found Damien in the hallway. Brooks, she whispered urgently. They've ordered deep sedation medications for Mrs. Pierce, scheduled for 5 a.m. Sullivan claims it's to stabilize her for transfer. I've never seen this protocol for a patient in her condition. The pieces clicked into place. If they put me under heavy sedation, I'd lose all control. Victor could have any document signed, any medical decision authorized. Once I was chemically incapacitated, the game would be over. When Damien relayed this information, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. We need to move tonight, I said, before dawn. Damien nodded grimly and turned to leave, but stopped suddenly, patting his pocket with a puzzled expression. He pulled out a small folded paper that hadn't been there before. The note contained just 9 words. Veronica is not the top. Beware of K. Damien looked at me, confusion evident on his face. Who's K? And who left this in my pocket without me noticing? I stared at the note, a chill running through me. I don't know, but it seems we're not the only ones playing this game. The clock on my hospital room wall read 1:17 a.m. In less than 4 hours, Victor's team would arrive with sedatives that would render me truly helpless. We had to move now. Damien placed a secure call to Lena on a burner phone. The 3 of us formed our emergency council of war, me propped up in my hospital bed, Damien pacing beside me, and Lena's determined voice coming through the speaker. We've got less than 4 hours to execute, I said, feeling more like my old CEO self than I had in days. Damien, contact Philip Dawson immediately. Philip had been my attorney for over 20 years, brilliant, ruthless, and above all, loyal. Damien used another burner phone to wake him, quickly explaining our situation and arranging to deliver all our evidence via an offline device. I need an emergency injunction. Philip's voice crackled through the speaker after Damien summarized our findings. A temporary restraining order freezing all actions related to your will and company control. Give me 2 hours. Philip activated his network, waking a sympathetic district judge with whom he'd worked for decades. Meanwhile, Lena sent anonymous emails with snippets of Victor's damning recorded conversation to several neutral board members and key shareholders. Just enough evidence to raise serious questions about tomorrow's meeting. Now for the escape plan, I said, my mind racing through scenarios with the same precision I'd once used to plan corporate takeovers. Dr. Harper and Damien orchestrated our most audacious move, a fake patient transfer. At 3 a.m., when the hospital corridors were at their quietest, they would move me out through the emergency staff exit, disguised as a routine transfer. Meanwhile, another patient with a similar build, a recovering pneumonia case who had graciously agreed to help after Dr. Harper explained a sanitized version of the situation, would take my place in the bed, face obscured by blankets and oxygen masks. The cameras will only show what looks like routine medical checks, Damien explained. By the time Victor realizes what's happened, we'll have secured the legal protection you need. I nodded, feeling the adrenaline clearing my head better than any medication. Let's move. The execution was flawless. Wrapped in hospital blankets and pushed on a gurney through service corridors, I felt like I was starring in my own espionage film. Damien's car was waiting at the loading dock, engine running. "We have a 40-minute drive to Philip's office," he said, helping me into the passenger seat. "Can you make it?" After what Victor tried to do to me, I straightened my spine. I could run a marathon if I needed to. Philip was waiting at his downtown office, documents spread across his desk. I signed affidavits confirming my mental competence, filed emergency petitions challenging Victor's power of attorney claims, and executed new directives reasserting my control over PeerSmart's operations. By 6 a.m., Philip had secured the emergency injunction we needed. Spencer's phone exploded with notifications from the board informing him that the emergency meeting was suspended pending legal review of a legitimate complaint filed by my attorneys. Victor, completely unaware of our countermoves, arrived at St. Clair Hospital at 6:30 a.m., undoubtedly expecting to find me sedated and ready for transfer. Instead, he found our decoy patient, still apparently unconscious, while the real me was sitting in Philip's office watching the dominoes fall. Lena reported that Veronica Steele had vanished sometime during the night. Her office was cleared out with professional efficiency. All files removed, computer wiped clean. She'd clearly had an escape plan ready, suggesting she'd anticipated that things might go sideways. By mid-morning, Philip had contacted select media outlets. The headline, "PeerSmart CEO Charlotte Pierce Fully Conscious, Alleges Conspiracy to Seize Control of Company," hit the business wires, sending our stock into temporary turmoil but effectively destroying Victor's narrative. While we celebrated this initial victory, Damien received troubling news. Someone had broken into Philip's office building overnight, targeting his specific floor. Fortunately, we'd moved all critical documents to Philip's home safe immediately after our meeting. As I sat in Philip's private conference room, processing the whirlwind of the past 12 hours, his assistant brought in a plain envelope that had been hand-delivered to the front desk with my name on it. "No sender information," she said, placing it cautiously on the table. Inside was a single item, a VIP access card for Kingsley Holdings, one of the largest private financial groups in the country. With it was a handwritten note, "Welcome to the real game." I stared at the card, turning it over in my hands. Kingsley Holdings. Could this be the K from the warning note? Before Philip could respond, his phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then slowly extended it toward me, his expression grave. "It's for you." Caller won't identify himself. I took the phone, my CEO voice firmly in place. "Charlotte Pierce speaking." A cultured male voice responded, smooth as expensive whiskey. "If you think defeating Victor is the end, you've underestimated the game you're in. We're waiting for you in New York." The line went dead before I could respond. 1 week after our dramatic escape from St. Clair Hospital, I stood on the courthouse steps, feeling the crisp autumn air against my face. Chicago's downtown skyline provided a fitting backdrop as I prepared to face the man who had shared my bed for 42 years and plotted my destruction. The Cook County Courthouse was packed beyond capacity. The attempted corporate takeover of PeerSmart by my husband had become national news, captivating both the business world and the general public. Financial networks broadcast live from outside, while reporters jostled for positions close to the entrance. I walked purposefully through the throng, Damian Brooks on my left and Philip Dawson on my right. My body had recovered remarkably well once freed from Victor's medical care. I wore a tailored navy suit, battle armor for the corporate warrior I'd always been. Ready? Philip asked quietly as we approached the courtroom doors. I nodded. I've been ready since I heard him planning my demise. The charges against Victor Sullivan were extensive: conspiracy to commit fraud, manipulation of medical records, forgery of legal documents, attempted theft of company assets, and bribery of medical personnel. The prosecutor had built an airtight case, bolstered by the mountain of evidence we'd gathered. Victor sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to mask the defeat already evident in his posture. When our eyes met, I saw something I'd never witnessed in all our decades together: fear. Spencer Reed had turned state's witness after facing his own criminal charges. He approached the stand with the nervous demeanor of a man who knows he's betraying a powerful figure. Mr. Sullivan instructed me to prepare the company for transition, Spencer testified, his voice barely audible at first. He said Mrs. Pierce would soon be declared permanently incapacitated and that I should begin implementing his agenda immediately. And what was that agenda? The prosecutor asked. To dismantle the core business structure Mrs. Pierce had built, liquidate certain assets, and prepare for a partial sale to Kingsley Holdings. A murmur ran through the courtroom at the mention of Kingsley. And who represented Kingsley Holdings in these discussions? Spencer swallowed hard. Veronica Steele. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was Kingsley's operative, specializing in corporate acquisitions through unconventional means. Dr. Harper's testimony proved equally damning as she presented the original medical charts alongside Victor's forged versions. There was never any medical justification for deep sedation or transfer to an unregistered facility, she stated firmly. Mrs. Pierce was recovering normally. These orders represented a serious breach of medical ethics. The most powerful evidence came when Philip played the recording of Victor's bedside confession. The courtroom fell silent as my husband's cold voice filled the room, detailing how he'd bribed medical staff and planned to have me declared incompetent. Victor's defense was pathetic. His attorney attempted to paint him as a concerned husband who had been misunderstood and was only trying to stabilize family assets during a medical crisis. The jury's expressions of disbelief made it clear no one was buying this narrative. When my turn came to testify, I approached the stand with my head high. Mrs. Pierce, the prosecutor began, in your own words, can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant? I looked directly at Victor. For 42 years, I believed I was married to my partner, someone who shared my dreams, my struggles, my victories. I built Pierce Mart from 3 stores to a national chain of 246 locations, all with Victor supposedly by my side. I paused, letting my words sink in. Now I understand he was waiting for the right moment to take everything I'd built. The jury's verdict took less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence reflected the severity of the crimes. Victor Sullivan received 25 years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. Spencer Reed got 5 years of probation and a lifetime ban from financial services. An international warrant was issued for Veronica Steele, whose name had now been linked to several similar corporate manipulation schemes. As we exited the courthouse, reporters swarmed around me, calling out questions about my plans for Pierce Mart and my personal recovery. Mrs. Pierce, how does it feel to have exposed your husband's plot? Will you ever trust again after such betrayal? I answered with the composed dignity I'd maintained throughout my career. Pierce Mart will continue to embody the values of integrity and service that have always defined us. As for trust, I still believe in people. My faith has been renewed by those who risked everything to help me. Damian Brooks and Lena Morris, whose courage reminds us that good people still outnumber the bad. As the crowd began to disperse, a young man in a courier uniform approached me, handing me a sealed envelope before quickly disappearing into the crowd. I opened it carefully. Inside was a map of New York City with a red dot marking the location of Kingsley Holdings' headquarters, along with a handwritten note. "If you want to end this completely, come here." I showed it to Philip, whose expression darkened. "They're baiting you." "Yes," I said, folding the map carefully. "But they don't know who they're dealing with, do they?" 1 month after Victor's conviction, I stood at the podium in Pierce Smart's gleaming headquarters atrium, facing a sea of reporters, employees, and investors. The company I'd built had weathered the storm, but not without damage. Now was the time to chart a new course. Pierce Smart has always been more than a retail chain, I began, my voice steady and clear. It's been a community, a family. Recent events tested us, but they also revealed our true strength, our people. Camera flashes punctuated the silence as I unveiled our restructuring plan. The business media had been speculating wildly about my next moves. Would I sell? Retire? Instead, I surprised them all. Today, I'm announcing several leadership changes that will secure Pierce Smart's future for generations to come. First, I'm appointing Lena Morris as our new Chief Executive Officer. Lena stepped forward, her composure perfect despite her obvious surprise. I'd only told her of my decision the night before. Ms. Morris embodies the values that built this company. Her courage in standing against unethical practices during our recent crisis proved she's exactly the leader Pierce Smart needs. Next, I introduced Damian Brooks, who stood somewhat uncomfortably in a suit instead of his familiar scrubs. Damian Brooks joins us as Director of Security and Compliance. His integrity quite literally saved this company and my life. He'll ensure Pierce Smart operates with transparency and remains protected from both external and internal threats. Finally, I revealed my personal passion project. The Pierce Legacy Foundation will launch next month with an initial endowment of $50 million, supporting employees facing hardship and funding community development in every neighborhood where Pierce Smart operates. Behind the scenes, I'd already begun a systematic purge of all business connections to Kingsley Holdings, hiring private investigators to trace the full extent of their operation. What they uncovered was staggering. A multinational financial group specializing in hostile takeovers through distinctly illegal means. Veronica Steele was merely one operative in their vast network of corporate infiltrators. 2 weeks after the press conference, I boarded a private jet to New York with Philip. It was time to face the puppet masters. The Kingsley Holdings Tower rose like a glass monolith in Manhattan's financial district. Security was tight, but the Kingsley representative had agreed to meet. They were curious about the woman who had derailed their carefully orchestrated plan. The executive suite on the 55th floor offered a panoramic view of the city. A silver-haired man in an impeccable suit rose as we entered. I recognized his voice immediately from the phone call. "Mrs. Pierce, I admire your tenacity," he said, extending his hand. "Lawrence Kingsley." I didn't take it. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Mr. Kingsley. I'm here to end this." I laid out 2 folders on his immaculate desk. "Your options are simple. Option 1, Kingsley Holdings signs a binding non-interference agreement with Pierce Smart, permanently withdrawing from any attempt to acquire or influence my company." "And option 2? Kingsley asked, his smile thinning. "I release everything my investigators have uncovered about your operations in 7 countries. The SEC would be particularly interested in your activities in emerging markets." He studied me carefully. "You know, in different circumstances, we could have been excellent partners." "I choose my partners more carefully than my husband did," I replied coldly. In the end, Kingsley chose self-preservation. The agreement was signed within the hour. As we left, Philip couldn't contain his admiration. I've never seen anyone back down Kingsley before. You've just made corporate history. 3 days later, Interpol apprehended Veronica Steele at a boutique hotel in Geneva. The international manhunt ended with her extradition to the United States, where she would face multiple charges of corporate espionage and fraud. Back in Chicago, PeerSmart flourished under Lena's leadership. Our stock value rose 32% within the quarter, customer loyalty reached an all-time high, and employee satisfaction returned to the levels I'd always insisted upon. The attempted takeover had paradoxically strengthened our brand, as consumers rallied behind what the media now called the comeback story of the decade. 6 months after Victor's conviction, I made my final executive decision: a complete transition of power to Lena and her team. I would remain as chairwoman emeritus, but the day-to-day operations would be in younger, equally capable hands. On my last official evening as chairwoman, I stood on the rooftop terrace of our newly renovated headquarters, watching Chicago's skyline illuminate against the dusk. Philip joined me, a satisfied smile on his face. Kingsley's legal team just withdrew their last appeal. It's over, Charlotte, completely over. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Kingsley Holdings VIP card I'd received months ago. Without a word, I let it fall from the terrace, watching it disappear into the city below. Footsteps behind us announced Lena and Damien's arrival. They joined us at the railing, the four of us forming an unlikely but unbreakable alliance. We didn't just save PeerSmart, I said, looking at each of them in turn. We rewrote the rules of the game. From now on, no one controls us but ourselves.